Hey guys, I want to get into something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and that's the T on the LGBT. Um, I've been in the community for quite a long time. Um, I'm male to female transgender, I'm also asexual. But the problem that I have with the T being in it is typically we aren't thought about until an afterthought, basically. When you see people on TV, gay rights activists, things like this on TV, when you see laws being brought into the public's domain, typically we're an afterthought, an addendum, and we're not thought about as a something that needs to be addressed unless somebody brings us up. If somebody says like, oh yeah, well there's 41% of trans that are committing suicide or trying to commit suicide every day, trans people are lost. When they point these things out, the gay rights people will say, oh yeah, that's sad, geez, that's really awful, and then they go on and continue to talk about their problems. And I feel this is a systemic problem because this is something that's been going on since the beginning of the issues. If you think about the woman who had her first sex change back in the early 50s, who came back to the U.S., the timing of then and now, the only difference in that time and now is maybe 3 or 4 laws that might have came out, and the belief that more trans people have been seen, and that if somebody sees somebody who's trans, you probably won't be accepted, but they'll know what it is, and that's it. That's all that's happened. Whereas in the gay community, so much more has happened in the last 50 or 60 years. And I feel it's like a abusive relationship that you'll see a woman in, where it's more than that even. It's like, as kids nowadays, it's hard for most kids to find themselves alone. And many times trans people feel alone. And they feel the need to associate themselves with somebody or something, a group, anything. And they want to belong. They have this overwhelming need to belong. And even if the group is not really, they don't really care about you and your issues and what your life, what's going on in your life and your problems. Even though they don't care about that, they will act like they do, and they will not pay attention to that problem. They'll not. They'll act like. I mean, there's so many things that are blatantly wrong with the LGB community, and they will overlook it because it's always been that way, and things are getting better. And it's the same kind of excuses you will hear when you talk to somebody who's been abused by a husband or a boyfriend. You know, oh, they really love me. He's not always like that. You know, it's not. You know, he really loves me, and you know, he told me he was sorry. And you know, when I hear trans people speaking about the LGBT community, this is what I hear when they're talking. You know, it's kind of like the Charlie Brown teacher thing, you know, where it's like wah 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 wah, you know. So when I hear these people talking, that's what I hear. You know, they're like, oh yeah, but this is, you know, we just have to work and try to get more rights for us and try to do this and try to do that, and we just have to keep working towards things. And as trans people, we keep helping the LGB community. We hold signs, we hold rallies, we get things started, we do a lot of things, and we very rarely get recognition for that. Recently a movie came out, and the movie was talking about a riot that happened in New York, and the first person to throw the first rock was a black transgender woman. And in the movie, it's a young twink white boy, you know. And because of that, on the set, you know, if they had a young twink white boy, that the whole movie was based around gays, and it was all gay white boys. Nobody on that set had the balls as an LGB community member to say, hey, this is wrong. This is you're recreating history. This is bullshit. You know, there should be somebody like Janet Mock or somebody here on this movie throwing the first rock, throwing the first brick. Nobody said that. You know, it would be like, think about the outrage that would happen if somebody did a movie on the I Had a Dream speech, and they had Kevin Costner play Martin Luther King in the I Had the Dream speech. What do you think would happen in the black community if that happened? They would lose their shit. They would lose their fucking mind over some stuff like that. But the gay community, the LGB community, is just like, oh, I can't believe they did that. They're changing history. Oh, geez. And then they just go on about their life like nothing happened. And there needs to be an outcry over that movie. There needs to be, they need to be shown that that is not something that is going to be acceptable in the community. But because nobody stands up for the trans community, especially the trans community of color, because nobody stands up and says no, it's continuing. And I think, personally, I think it's time for us, with as much recognition as we have gotten in this trans community in the last 15 years, and I'm not talking about laws, because in most of the cases when they bring up laws, the trans community is an addendum. You know, everything in the law has to do with gays and lesbians and everything else like that, which I'd like to point out that that has to do with who you're sleeping with, who plays with your genitals, whereas a trans is who I am as a person, not who plays with my genitals. But being an addendum to everything that happens in the LGBT community, I believe it's time for us to step away. And we have enough recognition in the community right now to start a transgender alliance. And that's what needs to happen, because that is the only way. If we separate ourselves from the LGB community and become our own community, that is going to be the only way we can fight for rights. Because if we don't do that, transgender women are going to be dying every day and being killed every day. And it's just going to keep going on. Just like the problem that we're having right now with gun rights in America. Every day, hundreds of people die. Thousands upon thousands of people die. And nobody wants to talk about it. Everybody says it's not an issue, or if they do say it's an issue, they say, yeah, but it's the amendment in the Constitution says I can have it. So nobody wants to deal with it. And the same thing is happening here. Nobody wants to deal with this systemic problem that we have, where the T in LGBT is the only thing that has to do with someone's gender, and not who plays with my genitals. And that's the problem. We really need to just step away. We need to step away. We need to create our own thing, and then we need to move forward with getting rights in almost every state in the United States and in many other countries. In fact, in Russia right now, there's people going around in gangs beating and killing transgender people. And that's actually something that's allowed. Most people don't go to prison, don't get charged for that. We need to create this because it's the only way we're going to end up with real change and stop this systemic problem and move forward in our community and get laws and get change and get rights for transgenders. We need that. And with as many things as just came out in the last 15 years, like Janet Mock, Chaz Bono, with as many things that came out in the last 15 years, we have so much of a steamroller effect right now, and the LGB community is holding us back. That's all that's happening. It's holding us back, and what they're doing is because we're associated with their community. They're using us to catapult them forward, and they're not, like I say, when they bring up laws and rules like the gay marriage and things, which is great. I'm not saying it's not great. I'm just saying that in the gay marriage law, it said nothing about transgenders. And that's something that needs to be addressed. Most of the laws that come out, most of the protests that happen, most of the things that are said are all done with transgender people helping, but the laws themselves don't say anything. And it only starts to say something, and gays will only put something in there if somebody who is transgender raises their hand and says, wait a minute, what about us? Then they go, oh, okay, well, we'll put something in here about you then, So we're an addendum, and they don't treat us like we're real people, Another wonderful set of people that I watch, Chloe, she was talking about, her friend was talking about working in a adult bookstore and having gay men come in and say derogatory things to her about her not looking like a man dressed up as a woman, and not realizing that she was not a real woman, because this is something that I want to really point out, because this is something that I think a lot of people miss. The fact that they've added T to LGBT states that a trans woman or man is not a real woman or man. That's basically what that state says, because LGB refers to your sex. So if you're going to have an organization where it's going to talk about sex, if you're trans, you're either trans gay or you're trans straight. And if you're a woman or a man and trans, and you've changed your gender and you're attracted to men and you're trans, a woman, then you're straight. You're cis, So you're already in there. So the fact that they felt they had to split that and turn you into a trans person, the problem that I have with that is when they make laws, it allowed them to separate you because you're not included anymore. It used to be inclusive, and now it's not. And the reason why they did that is people want to feel like they're a member of a group. So if you say, I'm part of the LGB community, that's fine. But then people start asking you if you're gay, or you're a lesbian. So they wanted to go further and say transgender. But by doing that, it allowed them to, when they make laws, to not have to put that person as a transgender, to not have to put that person in the laws. They don't put LGBT in the laws. It's only LGB, and that's what happens when you split so far. there's such a huge rift in the LGB community now that it's almost unheard of, you know, to be able to include everybody, because it's just like, you know, LGBTQ, TTS, fucking, you know, just goes on and on. And by doing that, it's very hard to include everybody, you know. But you would think, since it's LGBT, there's only 4 letters there, and by the 4th letter, we're already marginalized, you know. So what happens when you get 30 letters out, you know? So this is something, it's a systemic problem, and it needs to be solved. And I can't see any other way where it's gonna work out in our favor, you know. So that's what I thought I'd talk about today. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, if you got any comments, questions, leave them in the section below. Share, like, and subscribe. And have a nice day.